And hello, friends. We welcome you to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in the states of West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. We are pleased to be joined today by journalist and author Carrie Stambaugh as we talk to her about her new book, A Falcon Guide Hiking Kentucky, a guide to 80 of Kentucky's greatest hiking adventures. And Carrie joins us today as an accomplished journalist with an accomplished career in journalism and writing and reporting. In her college days, she was a college student writer for the Athens News. She took her first job in Pikeville, Kentucky with the Appalachian News Express. While working in Pikeville, she became captivated with Appalachia, especially the friendly people, vibrant music, and arts that surround the region, as well as the breathtakingly lush landscape of the hills and valleys. She settled in Ashland, Kentucky, where her work has appeared in a number of regional publications, including The Independent, the Ironton Tribune, the Greater Ashland Beacon, Bridges, Huntington Quarterly, Portsmouth Metro, and Tri-State Living. Her newspaper work has won numerous Kentucky Press Association awards and has been published by the Associated Press and CNHI News Service. She's currently the editor of the Greater Ashland Beacon and the Carter County Chronicle, two free publications that are family-owned and operated, and as a freelance writer, photographer, and communications consultant, she also applies her skills and talents to a range of other contracted commercial projects. She's currently working on a revision of her Falcon's Guide, Paddling Kentucky. That will be due out later in 2018. And her edited version of Hiking Kentucky was published in April 2016 and is now available from Globe Pequot Press. And we're delighted to have Carrie Stambaugh with us today to talk to us about her book, Hiking Kentucky. So, Carrie, welcome to Chapters. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about when you first got interested in writing this guidebook about Kentucky's hiking adventures, and when did you get interested and why did you decide to write it?
Well, I've been a hiker since I was a little kid, and this project actually kind of fell in my lap. A good friend of mine, Chris Irwin, who I actually run another website called KentuckyAngling.com with, he did a camping guide for Falcon Guide, and they approached him about doing the hiking guide, and he referred me to it. The previous author, Michael Brown, did the first two editions of the book. This is the third edition, and he has moved out of state and didn't want to do it, so they asked me if I would take on the project.
So when we look at this book, I learned a great deal about this book. Some of these, the trails and things you talk about here, I'd heard of, but I learned a great deal. How did you go about picking the 80 that were featured in this book? Was this 80 you were familiar with prior to, or was it just over the course of sort of writing the book, things you wanted to add? How did the 80 that got in here get featured? How did you go about that process?
Well, it was a combination of the two. I learned a great deal writing the book. My predecessor had about 70 in his previous edition, so we knew we wanted to add a few more to the book. In particular, I knew that I wanted to make sure that we highlighted some of the newer trails that have been added. There's a lot of energy and excitement right now in the hiking community in Kentucky. Under Governor Beshear, they had a adventure tourism office, and so I'm a firm believer in building up our adventure tourism economy. While I was writing for the newspaper, I saw that a lot, and I think, we're kind of behind the eight ball behind Virginia and West Virginia on doing that. So I've always had an interest in promoting Kentucky as a premier destination for hiking, and I think we kind of fly under the radar a little bit, so I definitely wanted to highlight some of the newer trails, and I wanted to go back and make sure that I provided something for everybody. I wanted something for that multi-day, intense backpacker, but I wanted to make sure that the book included smaller day hikes where people could take, their children, or even, someone who may have some mobility issues could walk. And I wanted to make sure that we blanketed the entire state. I'm a little partial to Eastern Kentucky, but I wanted to make sure that we covered the entire state. So I really sat down and it kind of looked at a map and spread it out. And then I talked to a lot of folks that are in the industry themselves, park rangers, Forest Service volunteers. I talked to hiking groups and got a lot of suggestions. And then I kind of weeded it down from there. We took some trails that had been in there that maybe were overused or have kind of, you know, lost their shine a little bit, and replaced them and updated them. So I worked, side by side with all those professionals to make sure that the book was accurate and that it highlighted the things that they really wanted to share too.
One thing, it ties into what you were just saying, that I really liked about the book too is you have it sort of categorized or broken off into hikes that are really suited to everybody's ability. Because when I was reading your book, the first thing I thought of was, I'm a little bit of a hiker, not a major hiker, but if I was just getting started, where are some places I could go? And the book features that. If you're just kind of getting started, or you want more of a low intensity, or as you were saying, maybe just an afternoon hike or a day-long hike, here's where you can go. So I thought that was really a neat feature. What are some of your favorite places to go hiking in Kentucky? You've got 80 great different types and styles here for every need and every experience level, but what are some favorite ones that you like or you would recommend if somebody's interested in hiking? Here's where you need to go.
Well, my favorite hiking trail by far is the Four Seas Trail in Carter Cave State Park. It's really close. It's off I-64, so it's easy to get to. There's a couple of reasons. The first is that it holds a very special place in my heart. It's where my husband and I went on our first date and where we got engaged. So I'm a little biased about that, but I think it's a small 8-mile loop trail that really offers the best of everything.
And I know that, and I did not know this until I got to your book, on page 107, you talk about the Red River Gorge area, that is really one of Kentucky's most popular hiking areas. I've heard of that area, but I didn't realize that there's 27,000 acres in there, and nearly 70 miles of trails, as you talk about in the book, from short hops of less than a mile to really some backtracking possibilities. So when we talk about the Red River Gorge, it's sort of, where are we in Kentucky, and how might someone get there from here? What's the easiest way to get there from here?
Well, the Red River Gorge is about, I guess, an hour and a half from here. You have to go on the Mountain Parkway, so it's on the edge of what we would call the Cumberland Plateau. Actually, from some of the tops there, you can see out onto the bluegrass area. So it's more centrally located in the state of Kentucky, and it is by far the most popular, well-known place to go in the state. It's somewhere that if you're looking for solitude, you're probably not going to get it in the Red River Gorge, at least not on a lot of the popular trails. A lot of the trails are popular because they're spectacular. They have all the things that you want in a hiking trail. They have the views, they have the natural arches that Kentucky is well known for, the rock formations, our big tall hemlock trees. A lot of folks just go to the gorge and they never go anywhere else. And part of the reason I wanted to highlight all of these other places in the book is because a lot of people think that's the only place you can go. The Daniel Boone National Forest runs from the border of Tennessee almost all the way up north to the border of Ohio and West Virginia. So it's a very long stretch, and there's tons of hiking all through there. The gorge is just one tiny little part of it, and so many people hike there. So, but it is a spectacular place, and if you do want some solitude, you should wander into the wilderness area there.
Very good, excellent. I learned a lot. It was one of my favorite sections, learning about a place I'd heard about for so long, but you did a really good job of explaining kind of where it is and why it's important. I want to come back to your book in just a second, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about your career, because
Sure.
you've had a great career as a reporter and a journalist. I did some research on you, and I found a couple articles. One of them I wanted to ask you about that was a Kentucky Press Association award winner, and it was your article called Generation Y to the Rescue. And there was one thing that really stuck out to me in your article, and you started by talking about, my Generation Y, has been shaped by trauma, loss, and adversity. Most of us were thrust into adulthood on 9/11, and it's my generation, my friends and cousins among them, who filled the ranks of the military in the greatest numbers to fight the two wars that followed. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote that article. It has such a good message, I think, not just for folks who may be in Generation Y, that Generation Y group, or may have children who are in that group, or know of someone who's in that group, or teach kids in that group. Why did you write that article, and what did you hope readers would take from that? Because as I mentioned, it did win the Kentucky Press Association award. So what were you hoping people took from that great article?
Well, I think we get a bad rap. I think my generation gets a bad rap. We're, the first that is really technical. We were born with technology. kind of right on the cusp of computers, and we are really the first to take it over. And I think, I read somewhere that we're also one of the first generations where adolescence is an extension of childhood instead of adulthood. So I think, I think we get a bad rap, and I think it's unfair because I think there is so much talent and so much hope and inspiration in our generation that I think it's time people start to pay attention of that. And I think we had to grow up so fast. For me, 9/11 was my first day of college. I literally was sitting in a political science class on my very first day of college when the towers fell. And overnight, I watched my friends enlist. I watched my friends go away to fight. I had the same fear and anxiety everybody else did. And it was just like our Pearl Harbor. And I think we were called to action at a very young age because we realized the world was changing around us. And I think we've kind of grown up in the shadow of that. And then, the Great Recession was just 7 years after that, as most of us were getting our first jobs. The stock market hit its lowest point about a week before I got married. So we dealt with things that were very life-changing very, very quickly. So I think that was my message was, hey, maybe you're being a little harshly unfair. And while we might be young, we have a lot to bring to the conversation. And these are the problems and the issues that are going to affect the rest of our lives, and that we need to be a part of this conversation, and our opinion needs to be valued very, very early. And I think you're starting to see that. I think, you have more people who are in that generation who are stepping forward and stepping into these roles. And, we have a lot to say. And we have very different value and belief system, I think, than even our parents. And, we're going to cause a little bit of turmoil, I think, as we age and as we take more of those leadership roles.
So when we talk, I probably should ask you this first. When we talk about Generation Y, what group are we talking about? Age range, periods when they were born, those kinds of things. What defines Generation Y?
I don't know if there's like a firm one, but obviously we follow Generation X. I was born in 1983, so I was right on that bubble of it. So I think they define it between like maybe 83 and 2000. Some people call that millennials. I wouldn't call myself a millennial. I think I prefer Y. But we're probably between the ages of 35 and maybe, 20, 21.
Okay, very good. Excellent. So if people hear Generation Y and millennials used together, it's pretty interchangeable then, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
Very good. Another article that you wrote that really caught my attention, A Woman's Call to Arms, and I think this ties into some of the points you were raising about Generation Y a moment ago. You talk about, I'm a member of the first generation of women who have been told from birth to always believe this: you can do or be anything you want to. An astronaut? Absolutely. Stay-at-home mom? Of course. CEO of a Fortune 500 company? You could start one of your own. Our mothers and grandmothers have always told us, you are an American woman. You have what no other women in the world have: control of your own body, therefore your own destiny. Go out in the world and do something we couldn't have imagined. I thought, just like with your, Generation Y to the rescue, had such an important message. Not just for women, but I think and how people look at women and view women, but maybe just across gender as well. That's got such an important message. Tell us a little bit about that article, because I thought that was really a good article.
I was raised by strong women. My mother and my grandmother are very strong, and like I said, I was always told that you can do and be anything you want to. And as I've aged, I've realized that as an American woman, I really have something that most of the world doesn't have. And so I think it's important that we recognize the sacrifices that came before us, but I also think that, and we've seen this in the last 5 years since I wrote those words, how easily things can be taken away, and how much farther we still have to go. We still have rampant wage discrimination. The Me Too movement has shown that we still have rampant, sexual discrimination. And, I have been the victim of that in my career. I think most women have. So I think we really need to pay attention, and we need to keep fighting to make sure that we don't lose the ground that we've gained. and that we continue in the fight for equality. I think that that's all everybody wants, is to be treated equally and to have the same opportunities. And I think there's a lot of danger, and the women's movement, I think, has recognized this, and kind of sitting back on our laurels and saying, oh, it's 2018, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And I just don't think that's true. I think we have to be very conscious of it, and we need to educate the next generation of women about what the world was like. When you think about it, when my grandmother was born, women didn't even have the right to vote. And, she's going to be 97 this year. So in just one lifespan, we've gone from not being able to vote to having a woman run for president. And, we still haven't hit that glass ceiling. So there's real benchmarks that we still have to make.
Absolutely. Very well said. Excellent. And I love that story, because I was reading that column and I thought, even though you wrote it several years ago, how it's sort of cyclical. It's come back around, as you said, to these issues still being at the forefront again. So I really enjoyed that. So you're currently the editor of the Greater Ashland Beacon and also the Carter County Chronicle. Tell us a little bit about those publications, and what is your role and responsibility in terms of the editor of those publications?
I also am the managing editor of the current media's publications of Bridges and Portsmouth Metro. So I'd like to add that I've spent about the last year and a half there as well. So I've added a couple more editing titles. My role really is to manage the flow of the work. I do a lot of kind of hashing out what we want to cover, making sure my writers are covering things. I feel like my job is to set the tone for the publication, and then to manage its various parts as it comes in. So, I do most of the story procurement, making sure that we cover local events. Of course, I do a lot of editing, and then kind of overseeing all the parts that come together. I do a little bit of writing now, but not as much as just kind of making sure that I get all the pieces together, coordinating between agencies, making story assignments, that kind of thing, making sure that everything kind of meets a certain standard.
Very good. Excellent. Very good. And something else I wanted to ask you, and we'll go back to your book here in just a second, but as I was looking information on your Facebook page and on your website about you, I noticed that you've taken some trips. You've gone to France, you've gone to Ontario, Canada, Holbox Island, Mexico, and the Great American Road Trip.
Oh, yes.
So which one was your favorite and why?
Oh.
If you had to pick one.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was fortunate enough to travel to France with the Rotary International. I went as a group of young professionals, and that trip by far was the most life-changing. I did it, I guess, about 5 years ago in 2013, and there were 4 young women, and we spent over a month in France, and we lived with French people. We would stay in their homes, and they would take us around, and it was just an incredible experience. The cultural exchange that went with it. I learned so much about their culture, but I also learned a lot about myself. I am a firm believer in the best way to grow is to be stretched till you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And traveling
Absolutely.
for 30 days in a country where you don't speak the language
Yes.
will definitely stretch you. And it really was life-changing because I saw myself for the first time as a real citizen of the world. Rotary International, is an organization that I could be a part of, that I could truly make a difference beyond the borders, and beyond the politics of our own country. I don't always agree with the message that, we officially send as a country, and Rotary is a way that I can exercise, my beliefs and do good works on a global scale. So it really was empowering. So that was a great trip. Holbox in Mexico was really an awesome place too.
And I totally mispronounced that.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's all right. Most Americans do. But that was probably my second favorite. I got to swim with whale sharks there.
Yeah.
So if you've ever seen a floating school bus coming to you, there's nothing to make you feel more insignificant than a giant living creature that doesn't care if you're there or not. So that was a really incredible experience.
Yeah. I've been overseas too, and I would recommend anybody, even if you just go for a week or two, go overseas, because you feel like a true global citizen just by spending other time in another country, especially if you don't speak the language or there is a language barrier. It's a very very humbling, but also a very personal growth experience. I would certainly recommend
And you
that.
certainly can't wait to get home on American soil.
Yes.
I think every American should
Yes.
travel because you truly realize how lucky we are and what we have at home.
That's exactly right. Makes you appreciate what we have. I
does.
totally agree. Back to your book here just for a little bit. If someone was wanting to get started hiking, if they want to take one of the lower strenuous tours that you write about, or they want to go full into one of the the weekend or week-long trails that you can hike, what are some things they need to think about? What are some things that you would recommend they do? Maybe physically, mentally, emotionally, in terms of supplies and things they would need. If someone's wanting to get into this, what are some things they need to keep in mind before they start going to these trails in Kentucky and hiking them?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is hiking boots or some kind of a hiking shoe. That's the most important thing. You want something that is sturdy and comfortable, and you want to walk in it a lot before you plan on doing any kind of hike. Every person's foot is different. I hiked for years in full leather boots, and then I switched to really lightweight light hikers that are more like a gym shoe, and now I'm back in a midweight boot. So the most important thing by far is to make sure you have good shoes, that they fit properly, and that you wear them around the house, you wear them to work, you wear them to walk your dog, and really get your foot used to it. The second thing I would say is to make sure you're walking, and walking off of a sidewalk. Go to the park and walk through the grass, walk in the woods by your house, because it's not the same as walking on a hiking trail. The way your foot rolls and the way you put your foot down is a lot different. So I would tell people to get out there and stay off the pavement. And then really, a lot of hiking is common sense. Make sure that someone knows where you're going. Make sure that you've checked the weather before you go. You don't need a lot of fancy gear. All you really need is a good pair of shoes. I would never recommend hiking in blue jeans. Cotton fabrics are heavy. If you do get wet, they're going to keep that cold on you. So I like to hike in yoga pants. Of course, my husband would tell you I do everything in yoga pants. But that's a good option. They don't get caught on things. They'll wick the sweat and the moisture away from you. And then to layer, because you will get hot going up and down hills. I think Eskimos say if you sweat, you die. Hiking is a lot the same way. It's once you're out there, people can get hypothermia or get overheated very easily. And make sure you always take water with you and a rain jacket. No matter what it says, I always take a rain jacket with me. So those are kind of the basics. And don't overestimate your own talents. It's better to start small than to, plan on going out the first day and hike 12 miles. And I have been guilty of that myself, especially on long distance hikes. I've thought, I can do 10, 15 miles, no trouble. So start off small.
Okay, very good. I want to ask you too about the picture on the front cover of this.
Yes.
With the two ducks here in the front and then the mountains in the background. Where is this exactly, and whose decision was it to put this picture on the front cover?
Well, this is actually Greenbow Lake. And my editors at the Falcon Guide made the decision to put this on the cover. It was not what I would have chosen, I don't think. But I think it's a great image to entice people to go out to see some of the wildlife that we have. I was really excited that we had something in Eastern Kentucky on the cover. That was, I think, what kept me out of the argument for, with my editors. I was thrilled to have somewhere in Eastern Kentucky on the cover. And Greenbow is an excellent place here to start hiking too. There's lots of trails there, and they have real small walks. In fact, they have a little walk that's right next to the lodge that I hike all the time because it's a real simple, easy walk in every weather.
It's a good way to build up your familiarity with hiking and try some of the things that you're talking about with shoes and get familiar with that.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I wanted, my biggest goal was, and this is with my hiking guide and the paddling guide I'm working on, is I want to make it accessible to everybody. So I wanted to make sure that people weren't intimidated. I think a lot of people get intimidated and then they don't try. And I wanted to make sure that there were lots of options for everybody. So.
Excellent. Very good, very good. I wanted to ask you quickly about the two books we mentioned at the top of our interview, the Falcon's Guide to Paddling Kentucky, how that's coming along, and the edited version of Hiking Kentucky. How was that process like? And in terms of your paddling Kentucky, where are you in the process of getting that put together?
Well, that book has been a challenge. It is, like I said, this book had two previous editions, so I had something to work with. There wasn't a Falcon guide for paddling Kentucky, and in fact, there hadn't been a guidebook for paddling the state that was like this at all. There were some guidebooks that list maybe all the waterways and then give some descriptions and places, but the Falcon guidebooks really make it easy. Every trailhead is GPS marked here, so you know exactly where to go. There's in-depth trail descriptions, so you know what to expect. And on the paddling guide, we wanted to do the same thing. And it's proved to be a little difficult because there isn't that master guide out there. So there's been a lot of trial and error. With hiking trails, you have a physical trail that you're following. With paddling, you can kind of pick your own trail. And so the process of figuring out where the best place to put in and the best route to paddle and take out has been a lot more involved than I expected. And then, of course, last year, the year before last, we had a drought. So a lot of the paddling was just dry. And then in the last year, we had some family issues that kept me off the water. So the book is actually scheduled to come out next spring. So it'll be a 2019.
Spring of 2019.
Yeah.
Very good.
It will be a smaller guide. There's going to be 40 paddling trails, and it will have the same kind of format as the hiking guide. There'll be 40 trails all across the state. I've broken the state up into kind of an eastern, a central, and a western section. And it will be lakes, rivers, reservoirs, kind of a range of paddling. There'll be a little bit of whitewater in the book, but there'll be more flatwater paddles, again, to try to get people on the water, to kind of take the guesswork out of it. And it will be like I said, the kind of the same format where there'll be a designated route for folks to follow. Because I think that's where most folks get intimidated, is they want to know what to expect.
Sure.
And especially with paddling, you add that extra element of water to it, and we want to make sure everyone stays safe. Now this book, Hiking Kentucky, I will be updating it. I believe, this one came out in 2016. So a brand new, fully revised edition will come out in 2021.
Okay.
And it will be a completely different book than this one. We will literally just start over.
Oh, interesting.
So I have already started, there will be some repeats, but it'll probably be a smaller book, maybe 40 trails, and it will be different than this one. So I'm already, getting trails that aren't in this one that folks want to make sure they highlight. And like I said, there's a lot of new trails going in. Yeah. Ashland has added some. There's a big trail town movement, and in the western part of the state, there's a lot of new trails that are going in. So by the time that book comes out, I think we'll have a lot of new trails to offer folks.
Sounds great. So, Carrie, as we finish up with you today, if someone wants to get in contact with you to talk to you about your career as a reporter, to find out more information about the Greater Ashland Beacon, the Carter County Chronicle, Portsmouth Metro, any of the publications you're an editor for, or if they want to get a copy of the Falcon Guide to Hiking Kentucky, how can they get in contact with you, and where can they get copies of your book?
Well, they can email me. My email address is carriestambaugh@gmail.com. My website is www.carriestambaugh.com, and there's a direct link on there to email me, and I can sell them copies of the books. I can personalize it to send it out to them. And also, folks can call me on the phone. I don't have a problem with that at all. My number's listed. And if they have a story idea, if they have a question about it, if they, want me to send them a signed copy, I don't mind calling at all. And I can give you the phone number if you want.
Sure, go right ahead.
It's 606-369-2635.
Very good. Excellent. Carrie Stambaugh has been our guest here today on Chapters. We've been talking to her about her career as a reporter and a journalist, but more importantly, her Falcon Guide to Hiking Kentucky, a guide to 80 of Kentucky's greatest hiking adventures, also published with the cooperation of the American Hiking Society, along with Michael H. Brown, which she has helped put together and revise. And so, Carrie, this is a great book for hiking enthusiasts, nature enthusiasts, people interested in getting into hiking and nature, but maybe looking at some of those places and learning more about places that they've heard about in Kentucky, but more importantly, some places maybe they didn't know much about with Kentucky. So it's a great book, and congratulations, and we look forward to the other publications that you'll have coming out in the near future. So thanks for coming on Chapters.
Thank you so much.
We also want to take a moment to thank Chris Dargish and the staff and management of Empire Books and News for providing on-site support and assistance today. We encourage you to come down to Empire Books and News and inquire about Carrie's book right here at the bookstore. It's located at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington, and we appreciate their support and sponsorship each and every episode here of Chapters. And if you'd like to stay in contact with the program, we've made a variety of ways possible for you to do that using social media. The first is our email address, and that address is right here at the bottom of the screen. Please let us know your name and town from which you're writing from so that we can keep track of that correspondence. If you like to view programs on YouTube, we also have a Chapters page through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube, and that address is also here at the bottom of the screen. Just look for the Chapters tab or the Chapters button when you go to that web address, and we've got all of our author, editor, and publisher interviews archived for you right there through YouTube. And we also have a Facebook page for Chapters on Facebook, and that address is right here at the bottom of the screen. On our Facebook page, we have more of our recent episodes archived for you there as well. You can interact with viewers of the program, you can comment on the program, share those to your Facebook page and other outlets that you have connected to Facebook. So if you like Facebook, if you like YouTube, you like email, we've made all of that possible for you to access our programs and stay in contact with the program through one of those means. And we know many of you have done that. We appreciate that so very much. That's going to do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.